Good evening. My name is Mia Harris, and today I will be showing you how to make a not so homemade butter pecan cake. The reason that I say that is because, as you can see, I will be using a box cake mix from Betty Crocker, butter pecan flavor cake mix. I will also be using the frosting, coconut pecan frosting. My other ingredients will be 4 eggs. I also have a 3/4 cup of oil, a 3/4 cup of water. And if you don't have the traditional measuring cups, you can also use the measuring spoons I have here. And this one here is a 1/2 of a cup. This is a 1/4 of a cup, and together they make 3/4 of a cup. So just another option in case you don't have measuring cups. Okay, so I also have my bundt cake pan, my mixing bowl, a spoon, my blender, and then my cake pan, which I will put my finished product into. Okay, so before we get started, let me go ahead and preheat the oven. The oven will be preheated at 350 degrees. Okay. So I also have a pair of scissors here that I use to open up my cake mix here so I don't have to struggle opening up the pack. Just makes for better ingredients. And I like to try to put all of my trash, if you will, back into the box so I wouldn't have less of a mess. Okay, now the recipe for this butter pecan pound cake, it tells you to use your first 4 ingredients. Mix them up together first. So I'm gonna mix my cake mix, my eggs, my 3/4 cup of water, 3/4 cup of oil. Okay. And so that's my first 4 ingredients. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit and blend that all together. And while we're blending that, this is a very moist cake. Even though it's a box cake, it's one that your family will love. And the reason being is because it tastes so much like a homemade cake. Right from the beginning, you wouldn't realize or even know that it was a box cake because of how moist and how soft it is. And we're going to blend this and make sure that we get it completely blended so we don't have any lumps or anything in it. And I like to blend it more than what maybe the box might say. The box may say let it blend it 10, 15 minutes or, so many strokes. But I try to make sure that it's completely blended before I do my next step. So I'm just going to turn the blender up, mixer up just a little bit so I can hurry to make this process go a little bit faster. Okay. Cakes have been around for a very long time. Okay. Cakes have been around for a very long time, and they are much desired dessert. So most times, growing up, you have Sunday dinner at Grandma's. Grandma always had a cake. So I'm doing that practice now, making sure that Grandma have a cake when the grandbabies come over. So for me, this is a go-to cake because of my busy schedule. Most times I just don't have time, and if someone needs a cake or I have to make a cake, in a short period of time, and I don't have time to prepare or make sure I don't have all the ingredients I might need for a homemade cake, this is the go-to cake that I can do and still have the desired effect of a dessert on Sunday. So this is our 5th ingredient, and as you can see, this is the frosting, coconut frosting. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pour this frosting into our batter. Yeah, this is a little bit different. Most time you don't see frosting going inside the batter, but this is the secret ingredient I call it, because this is what makes the cake so moist. Okay, you want to get it all out of there. Okay, now where I use the mixer for the first 4 ingredients, the recipe makes a footnote to say to stir in the frosting. Do not use a mixer. Make sure you have a good sturdy spoon, and make sure you stir it in very, very well so that you don't have any big clumps of frosting in it. You have to excuse me. Okay. So I like to make sure I turn it quite a few times to make sure that I don't have any big clumps. And as you see, there's no big clump there. Okay. So we stir, stir, stir. This is a good workout. You know, we're going to work those arms. Okay. So the first baking skills noted were by the ancient Egyptians. And they made more of a cake-like, bread-like cake, you know, and they sweetened their cakes with honey instead of flour. What I'm getting ready to do here now is I'm going to oil the pan, and this is Pillsbury baking spray with flour. So I'm going to oil my pan. Get my pan all ready for a cake mix. Okay. All right. I'm going to give this a little bit more of a stir to make sure that it is good. And so another fact that I did not know or did not realize about cakes is that they can also be used in ritual, or they are used in rituals. The Chinese, the Russians, and the ancient Celtics used cakes in their rituals for the first day of spring, harvest moon festival, you know, something as a delicacy for their gods or a sacrifice for their gods. You know, I was very intrigued by some of the reading I had on cakes and the history behind cakes. Now, Betty Crocker, some facts that I did not know about Betty Crocker, this has been around since 1921. And Betty Crocker is actually a brand name that was used. They had female models that would model, and they were the face of Betty Crocker. And they used the name Betty because it was kind of cheery, kind of inviting. You know, she, you know, seemed like she might have been lovable. And then Crocker actually came from the director, whose name was William Crocker, and he was the one who actually came up with the Betty Crocker brand name. So they used the symbol of the lady Betty Crocker and named it after him because of his brand. Okay, so just recently they started using the Betty Crocker logo. I think this started in 2003 where they actually used the logo. Then they no longer use the face of the lady. So, and they used to use a lot of models, and Adeline Humpsey was one of the models that they used back in the day. So, like we say, cake plays a very, very major role throughout the years. And back in the 1920s, around the Great Depression, things like that, you know, cakes were expensive, you know, trying to use, you know, refined sugars and nuts and different things of that nature to make your cake. It was very expensive. So cake was a symbol of importance. So if someone baked you a cake, it meant that they really, really cared for you because it was an expensive thing to make. Well, of course, we don't have that problem now, you know, refined sugar and nuts and honey and any other ingredient that we may want to use in our cake is not very expensive these days, you know, so we can easily put something together. And as you can see, even using the box cake, you still won't be too expensive. Okay, so I just want to make sure I get all this cake mix out of here. I want to make sure we get all the cake mix because we want our cake to rise to its full potential. All right? Okay, so, all right. So here we are. area clean as I make this cake. And I like to kind of swish my cake around a little bit just to make sure that it's level and to make sure that it rises evenly, okay? So we have preheated our oven to 350 degrees. So at this point, I would put the cake in the oven. And this cake will bake for 1 hour. This cake will bake for 1 hour at 350 degrees. So that's why I say again, like I said earlier in the presentation, that this is a not so homemade pound cake, you know, because this cake is going to bake for an hour, you know. So generally your cake mix usually won't bake for no more than 30, 35, 40 minutes. But you actually will have this cake in the pan for a whole hour. So that's why I feel like it's a box cake, but it's as close to homemade as you can get at this point. So while that cake is baking, I have another cake here that I've already prepared. Let me move some of my dishes here out of the way here. I have one that's already prepared. So here we have one coming out of the oven. You're going to flip your cake over. And this is cooled down some already, so because you know I wouldn't be able to touch this pan straight out of the oven. But it's already cooled down some. And there you are. And this is our butter pecan pound cake. So let's get a look at what this cake actually looks like. Okay? And so this will be an excellent cake for an after dinner meal. You want to have it with a nice cup of milk or even a nice cup of coffee. This will be a very good cake for you to try. Okay? So as you can see, it's very, very moist cake. It's actually very delicious too. Okay? And there we have a butter pecan, not so homemade pound cake. I thank you for your attention. Again, I'm Mia Harris, and you have a good evening.